I would love your perspective on the state of American society. Just less on the political spectrum of Republican versus Democrat, but just observe for us, Tucker, what do you see in American society? Where are we as a society? What has happened? What is happening?
Well, this isn't an 8-hour podcast. I could actually give you my very lengthy theories and views on that. But I will just say one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently. I just had my college roommate staying at my house. And, we're, of course, the same age, known each other our whole adult lives. He's been very successful, and he lives in an enclave of very, very successful people. And so we're familiar with this culture. And we were talking about and he's from an immigrant family. So he's got a kind of broader perspective, I would argue a broader perspective on like America. He's 54 as I am. And we were talking about how obviously this is not a democracy. It's not even a sort of decent facsimile of a democracy. To call it a democracy is ridiculous, actually. But it's even worse than that. Our politics, and not just our politics, but our public conversation, reflects the very specific and parochial concerns of a tiny, tiny group of people, which is middle-aged, affluent women who tend to be very angry and tend to, mostly with their husbands, but probably for other reasons too, and exercise this wildly disproportionate power over what we can talk about and think about and the rules that the rest of us live by. It's just kind of amazing. And he happens to live in Jackson, Wyoming. And I go there, to ski and to fish. And I have for a very long time. And I always say to him, I can't go anymore because I get yelled at lunch over my elk chili or in the lift line or whatever, or at the, West Side Market. Literally a relative of mine yelled at me while buying bananas in the West Side Market. She lives there. And I'm thinking, what is it about this group of people that hates me so much when, again, I know them really well. I'm related in some cases to them. So, and I'm not quite sure, but I see our politics and our concerns, which if you take 3 steps back are insanely picayune. Trans Black Lives Matter. Well, I never said they didn't, but if that's your main public policy objective to celebrate trans Black lives in a country of 360 million people, it's got a lot of big problems. You are not seeing the whole picture. So what is that? And what it is, again, is the disproportionate influence of a class of people and their neuroses. I wouldn't even say policy concerns, but their things they're worried about and their weird personal tics and the result of years of therapy and SSRIs on their brains. That kind of controls our whole conversation. And my friend was saying, because he's really smart, he's yeah, but the good news is, this can't last because it's just too stupid. And at some point very soon, the country's going to revert to the place that all countries begin, which is in a conversation about things that matter, like who comprises the population? Do we have enough water? Where are we on energy exactly? How are we going to manage these complex relationships with other countries? The things that, the stuff of government, the stuff of
resources.
Well, of course, resources, but just the basic questions that should dominate the consciousness of any country and should dominate our public conversation. It's our public obsessions are getting increasingly irrelevant, actually. Mm-hmm. Increasingly, it's crazy.
As our problems get bigger.
Yeah, and
the conversation becomes more inane as the problems get bigger.
Thank you. Exactly.
So when you look at that cohort's disproportionate impact, and then you translate it, for example, last night there was, I guess a almost riot protest when folks were trying to light the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center, I guess, and there was a huge pro-Hamas, I think, somebody check me if this is wrong, protest, and then people were pushing back on the cops and all of this stuff, and all these folks were trying to do was just light the Christmas tree. Can you connect the dots? How does that cohort get to...
It's actually a branch from the same tree, Christmas tree in this case, because that whole conversation, while I think it's interesting and I think it's geopolitically significant, and I've been to those countries and I know people there, so I'm interested in it, and there's a lot to care about and be interested in. But the displacement of all of our public passions onto a conflict in a foreign country, however important that conflict may be, really kind of tells you a lot. It's in other words, yeah, I care what's happening between Israel and Hamas. I have views on it, which are probably pretty mainstream views, whatever. I don't have any very interesting views on it. But it's a little weird for your entire country thousands of miles away to be so preoccupied with that conflict that they miss big history-changing events happening like in their own country. And I think that's, again, a species of the same problem. We are unable to, the problems that confront us are so big that we can't deal with them. And actually, my wife and I had this conversation the other night. I was for years a magazine writer, and I have to file every Friday. I work for Bill Kristol at the Weekly Standard, and obviously I regret that, but it was interesting at the time. And I have to file the story every week. And I'd stay up all night because I'm very lazy and I put stuff off. And I'd stay up every Thursday night, all night. And my editor would call. It's going to the it's going to the printing press in Pennsylvania. This was back when it was in print. And you got to file it. And right around 8:30 a.m. on Friday morning, I would have this overwhelming urge to rearrange the books on my shelves in my library by title or by subject. I'd like have all these weird kind of like librarian fantasies about rearranging books, which on a normal day, like, why would you do that? And better things to do. But as my problems mounted and I couldn't like write the lead I wanted, I would transfer all my anxiety onto something I felt I could control or that was of lower stakes, less consequence. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing a little bit. Like, we care more about foreign wars and trans lives as like the obvious things that hold our society together start to fall apart. Because like, how do you even deal with that? I don't know if I'm being very articulate, but I think that's what's happening.
Makes perfect sense. What do you put on the top of that list of things we should be focused on, Tucker?
Oh, I mean, but from my perspective, by far the most.
Rank 1, 2, 3. This is what America needs to put its energy on.
It's not even close. National cohesion, and by which I mean something specific. What does the majority of the country have in common with one another? Because look, if the arc of the last century's American history is super, super interesting. So you have this massive influx of immigration, the Ellis Island generation, late 18th, or 19th, early 20th century. And it's both good and bad. We only remember the good, but there was a lot of social volatility, like a lot. Like the mayor of Chicago got shot in his house. There was bombings on Wall Street. Like the Wobblies, the anarchists, like the foot soldiers that were immigrants, working class European immigrants. And part of the problem was there were just a lot of immigrants. And I mean, Sacco and Vanzetti, who shot the clerk in, was it Brockton, Mass? Anyway, it was in Mass, outside Boston. They'd been in the country for just a few years and they immediately got sucked into radical politics. Well, why was that? Well, because they weren't kind of bought in or rooted in or hadn't been fully assimilated into American society. So then you have the First World War, and we basically shut down immigration, and we have this period of settling where, like, all Americans, let's think through our civic religion, what ties us together, and then that leads into October of 29, and you do have this national crisis that lasts for more than a decade, and we didn't blow up. And we had a successful, the CCC, we had these big programs, which I'll say this as a conservative, kind of worked in keeping people fed and focused, gave them purpose, kept the country from collapsing during the Great Depression. If that happened now, when there is no broad agreement on what it means to be in America, no agreement at all on what we all have in common, I don't think we can withstand it, actually. I really don't. And I'm not even convinced it matters as much what that civic religion is as it does that we have one. If we don't have anything that ties us together, when that day comes, and you know what I mean, when the economic crisis comes, because it's coming, like, what's that going to look like? It's going to be very scary. And so that's what I'm most worried about by far.
How do you define national cohesion, I guess, maybe then? Like, what are the few elements that you think America needs to agree on as a majority?
Wake me up from a deep sleep and ask me what it means to be an American. Okay? And then do the same to 1,000 other people, and we'll just do a survey on it. And do the majority of those people give the same answer? And if they don't, so this is, okay, I have so many theories, God, I'm gonna control myself, but I would just say one other thing, which is we overestimate people's ability to metabolize change. I'm not like a strict Darwinist or anything, but I do sort of believe that over time people adapt to their environment, and that, in us is, most of our abilities are inborn. Like, that's just true. Sorry. I have dogs. I know that. And people just haven't, the world didn't change that much from, 460 or whatever, the sacking of Rome, until the Renaissance. It just didn't. And then the Industrial Revolution to now has been like such massive change that it's driving people insane. People can't handle relentless change. And technologists love relentless change, and I like a lot of technologists. A couple are really good friends of mine, but they're anomalies. A lot of them are literally autistic. I'm not attacking them. I'm praising them, but they're different from most people.
Sachs is on the program right now, Tucker.
You're right, but like they can handle it. They can, like, they want a world that's totally different from today's world tomorrow.